Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin'. Today we're talking about the biggest mistake that I see anglers make in the summer and what you can do about it. Summer fishing is amazing as long as we don't get in our own way. The bass fishing can be incredible. There's a lot of fish, there's big fish, but it is hot out. And when it gets hot, if the bite's not good, it can be miserable. And as anglers, we get on our own way a lot. We make endless mistakes, right? We're always overcomplicating it. We're making a mess where there didn't need to be a mess. If I tried to make a list of all the things that we all do wrong in the summertime, it is an exhaustive list. But there is one thing on that list that stands out from all the others that anglers are just blowing as a rule. I mean, it is just the biggest mistake that is hurting your fishing. And today I want to, one, highlight the mistake, and two, highlight the solution, because I can't think of a faster way for you to alter the rest of your summer than to take this piece of advice to heart. As anglers, we love to fish what we can see, right? That's a real thing. Let's start with the mistake. What is it? The mistake is sticking to the visual cover, and there are actually a lot of anglers who are getting better about that. Fishing offshore, advancements in electronics are allowing us to fish offshore more effectively. So more and more guys are actually avoiding the visual cover, but we will still talk about that. A lot more people are moving offshore, but they're still blowing it by fishing hard structure, okay? I'm gonna combine those two things today. So what is the mistake? The mistake essentially is fishing for fish that have been beat to death in most of the country since February or March. Your fish have been pounded, but you're going to go out there tomorrow and without thinking about it, try to pound on them one more time, instead of doing something truly different, instead of fishing for fish that really have been left alone, that really are fresh and really are ready to bite. There is this other pattern that almost everyone, be it the guy who fishes the bank or the guy who fishes offshore, both groups are missing. That's what we're talking about today. Don't be the guy who continues to pound the fish all summer long, suddenly expecting different results. The fish that you started throwing a topwater at in May have seen your topwater. The fish that you started slinging a Senko to in March have seen your Senko. They've had enough. But there are some other fish that are fresh. So here's the deal. Where are those fish? What is the deal? How do we catch them? It's going to depend on your lake. I want to describe two different scenarios, and you're going to choose which one best applies to you. If your lake has a bunch of grass in it, that's one category. If your lake has little to no grass in it, that's a second category, okay? Let's talk about the grass lakes first. Now, what I want to talk about with grass, again, the mistake is continuing to pound on that visible cover, those shallow fish that have just taken the beating. There are still fish there and they will still bite. That's why you do it. But the results most likely are not going to change this time of year. You're not suddenly going to catch bigger ones. You're not suddenly going to catch more of them. You have to do something different. Here's what the something different is. There is a whole nother grass line that you are ignoring in your lake. What am I talking about? The offshore grass line. In a grassy lake, your grass might stick out 10 feet off the bank in a reservoir. It might stick out a quarter mile in a shallow lake. It might go farther than that. But regardless, there is an outside grass line in your lake. How do you find it? Electronics are huge. If you have the ability to go out and turn on side imaging and start driving across your lake, you will see when you arrive at a grass line. If you don't have that tool handy, use mapping, whether that is an app on your phone, whether that's Google Earth, whether that is your electronics. Use mapping to try and find those likely places where you see it break to deeper water. Go drive those places and try to find that edge. If you have none of that, Google Earth is your friend. Get on an aerial image of your lake and you can often see where the dark suddenly just turns to lake water. That's your grass edge. But that edge can be fished the exact way that you fish your hard shoreline. What I mean by that is there's grass up by the bank, be that reeds, hydrilla, it could be any number of things, but way out offshore, and again, depending on the lake, that might be 10 feet offshore, that might be a quarter mile or more offshore. You will arrive at the end of the grass where it starts getting too deep for that grass to get light to be able to grow, and there's a hard edge out there. That edge is your new summertime shoreline. Treat it as a shoreline. You will fish that edge. The beauty of that edge is that it's not actually hard, which means we can still cast up over the grass. We can still fish in the edge and we can fish just outside of the edge. Now, in some lakes, that edge might go for miles. So you are going to treat it the exact way that you treat the shoreline, meaning you're looking for coves and points to fish. When you follow a grass edge, it will not be a straight line forever. There will be pockets and there will be points in the grass edge. Now, depending on the lake, this grass edge might be deep. In some lakes, it's just under the surface. Some of my favorite lakes to fish this time of year are the lakes where that grass has topped out way offshore 1 to 5 feet under the surface of the water, because the baits that we can throw through that are amazing. Now, in other places, it's down deeper and we'll shift our baits a little bit. We're about to talk about those key baits that I use to do this effectively. But again, we will fish that new edge like it is the shoreline. We're looking for the things that are different. We're looking for coves or pockets back in the grass edge where bass can corral bait fish. We're looking for points that stick out from the rest of the grass edge where they can ambush from. And we're looking for harder edges, smoother edges, high spots in the grass, or places where a single grass clump is farther out than the main grass edge. That's a big fish spot where they stick out further. So how do we fish these places effectively? The only thing that's changed is that it's no longer that visual. If the grass is close enough to the surface that you can see it, awesome. That's the easiest. But if it's not, it's okay. You just picture it in your mind that you're following a shoreline out there and you just keep casting. The big thing when you start doing this in the beginning is you need to be able to cover water, because you've got to identify those key places, and there's no shortcut to do that. It's getting on that grass edge just like getting on the bank and just covering water. My favorite way to do it is with the top water. If the fish will come to the surface, if your grass is close to the top, I don't care. Again, if we're a quarter mile out in the middle of the lake, I will be slinging a top water. It's incredible how well it works. That on a calm morning is my favorite time to do it. Get out there on the grass edge, not where it breaks, but just back. So I'll set my boat just off the grass in the deep water, and I throw a top water up over the shallow grass, and then I work out to the break and I come off that edge. This bait right here, that Giant Dog X, is one of my favorite top waters to do that. It is a subtle bait. It's a bait that isn't overwhelming. It can call those fish up, but it's not going to spook those fish. Again, these grass edge fish, they don't get fished for as much. They're not as used to a bunch of commotion. They're not as used to a bunch of sound. They're not getting beat on. So you want to be careful. You want to creep around, take your time, use subtle baits. But again, we need to be able to cover water fast. So that bait, that color is called Juvie Craw. That's one of the colors that Tim and I got to design in this bait. But a bluegill color or a shad color, Those are the two that I'm slinging right now. Okay, and again, in the video description, I'll link the baits, my favorite colors. If there's any terminal tackle, I'll link that for you so that you can do this effectively on your bait, on your lake. But that bait, that Giant Dog X, has become such a confidence bait of mine for getting those wary fish to bite. It's like halfway between a walking bait and a popper in terms of its commotion, and they just respond to it. A lot of these grass edge fish, again, the reason why I reached for that bluegill color, that juvie gill, that baby bluegill, is that a lot of the bluegill are out on this grass edge. Now you'll get shad there too. They get pushed up in there, but a lot of lakes, it's all bluegill driven. Second bait that I'm going to throw is a chatterbait. Okay, the chatterbait will allow us to cover a ton of water, to fish fast. It has a lot of drawing power, and it will clean itself when you get it stuck in the grass. What I mean is you won't get snagged. Fire it up the same way I would throw the topwater. Fire it up on that shallow stuff and just start working it. That blade's up there kicking. You're getting that great vibration, and then if it hangs in the grass, you just snap your rod tip to clean it, and it will keep going. This color right here, that Alabama brim color in that Z-Man Evo Elite, is a killer for this pattern. This is my favorite trailer for it. That's the Spunk Shad, the Hog Farmer Spunk Shad 4.5. That's a Tackle Warehouse exclusive color. That one's called Sunfish Magic. And this pairing, let me put them together so you can see it. I mean, I'm not just saying this is a good pairing. Look at it. It's wild how good this thing looks. Again, when you're trying to imitate the smaller bluegill that are using that grass for cover, that's the one. That's the setup right there. I use those baits to cover a lot of water. Then the third bait that I'll use is a soft jerk bait. That's the X-Zone Whiplash Shad. It's a little bit larger profile, so I have more drawing power. I can pull them up out of the grass. And then I use the Whiplash Shad specifically because of the way it moves in the water. It's a very snaky action. It's very different than, say, a super fluke, something that's super darty. It's this methodical swimming action as you're working that soft jerk bait. And I just get an incredible fish response out of that thing. It works so well. So those are three baits that I'll use to cover water to find my sweet spots. Now, later in the day, after you found sweet spots, or it's just, you know, the sun's up high now, it's starting to bake. We know this time of year, we just did a video not too long ago talking about fishing shade, using double shade to your advantage, right? We know that those fish aren't going to stay up there in the middle of the day, just totally exposed when it's super hot. So what do? They use the grass edge and they'll move up and down it. So in the morning, they'll move up and they'll feed. In the afternoon, they'll drop off that edge, suck to the bottom. And then to get that double, they go deeper for shade, but to get that double shade to really protect themselves on the really hot days, they go just into the grass. So they're sitting in the grass, down deep in the shade, and they're totally protected. So in the morning, you can target them up and out. In the afternoons, when it's hot, you're going to target them down and in the grass. Two baits that do that really effectively. It just depends how deep in the grass they are. If they're just sort of on the edge, my favorite thing to do is throw a shaky head for them. I crush them on a shaky head worm. This is that, that's that fat finesse worm. So I throw the deception worm a ton. Through the years, we've thrown the T-Mac a ton. This is a shorter worm. It's a 6-inch worm, but it's a thicker worm than I normally throw. It's just a little more presence. I'm able to throw that on that Canterbury shaky head, which has a little bit more hook to it. Because again, I'm fishing these fish around grass. So if you hook a big one, you may find yourself burrowed in the cover real quick. When I'm throwing a shaky head, I'm using fairly light tackle, but I want to be able to power up a little bit. So I'm typically going to throw this on 10 to 12 pound, 12 pound if I can get away with it. With that Canterbury head, I can put a lot of pressure on them. That worm is a smaller worm, but it's thicker, so it's enough to get those fish to bite. But I've got that bigger hook that I can really jack them and try and pull them out off of that grass line. What I like to do with a shaky head is parallel the grass. So I've got a grass edge and then it ends and there's no more grass. I try to parallel just inside the grass. So I'm constantly in the grass, but I'm right on the edge. That's where I like to fish that bait. If the fish aren't in the mood, or if they've gone deeper in, then I turn to a jig. Just taking a jig and pitching it right in the grass and letting it go all the way to the bottom, working it and repeat. A pitch and jig is a great option to do that effectively. This is the same jig that we talk about in every video, right? If you could only have one, the answer has not changed. That is a Dirty Jigs 1/2 ounce pitch and jig. The color is called the Go-To. I've got that 4-inch muscleback craw on the back of that thing, and send it. This is not the perfect jig for every situation, but it is a jig that is capable of doing everything. Everything can be done with one jig if you want to. If you don't want to take a deep dive into the world of jigs, that's the one. It's that simple. Throw it in your box and you're set for those situations. So if they're in that grass, that's my game plan. It's that simple. You can do this. It's not 50 different baits. It's not a bunch of weird exotic stuff you've never heard of. We're talking topwater, chatterbait, soft jerkbait, a worm, and a jig. Does it get more simple? I mean, that's like the bass fishing nutshell right there, right? We've got it. Now, let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. If your lake doesn't have grass, or the fish have moved out beyond the grass line, they just prefer to be deeper in your lake for whatever reason. Maybe you're a highland reservoir, they like to be out. Maybe you're a lake that's got a lot of ledges, they like to be out. Maybe they've moved out to where there's some current, right? There's a lot of reasons that they'll go out. On these lakes, most guys will go out to, it's not visible shoreline cover, it's visible structure on their electronics. Meaning, they'll go out to an offshore hump, they'll go out to a break line, they'll go out to the end of a main lake point, right where they should, right where we've been talking about going. Why do you go there? Because there's bass there, and you can catch them, and you can catch giants. But again, we're getting to the time of year where these fish have been taking a beating. In most of the country, fish started heading back to those offshore structures in May. They've been getting hammered ever since. Those fish used to be protected 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years ago. No one was fishing for them. If you could get out on those fish, you were killing it. But the world is changing. Anglers are adapting. Electronics have adapted. It is easier to get out there and fish without visible cover, right? It's easier now. You've got good mapping to look at. So there are more guys out there whaling on those fish than ever before. And the result is that the fish in the middle of the lake sometimes get cautious too. There's another spot. We talked just a few weeks ago about getting out offshore and fishing the color line. That is a real thing. If you're not familiar, let me explain. Let's take a brief dive into the color line. There is a color line on every lake. I don't care if it's a shallow lake or a deep lake, but the deeper the lake, the harsher the transitions, the more obvious the color line becomes. So a highland reservoir, clear water, you can spot a color line in a second. Lowland reservoirs, they're a little bit harder to see. The less transition in the bottom, the harder it is to see. The faster the transition, the easier it is to see. But what the color line is in any lake, you've got the shoreline coming out, you've got sunlight penetrating and it's hitting the bottom, okay? As it gets deeper, you will reach a point where the sunlight can no longer make it all the way to the bottom. Right there, that's the color line. You can visibly see it with your eyeballs in a clear reservoir. You'll look up at the bank and you see this like tannish brown water, the shoreline water. You're looking at bottom through the water and it comes out and it's starting to change color, and then all of a sudden it turns to that deep blue or that deep green. That is where you've arrived on your color line. You can visibly see where you can no longer see bottom through the water. It's no longer shifting the color of the water. You see that deep open water color. That color line is where those fish are pulling to. Now, let me back up. We talked a bunch about grass. We talked about that grass edge where the grass could no longer grow. Spoiler alert, do you know what that is? It's the color line. The sunlight no longer hitting bottom. The grass can't grow there. There's no sunlight. Just in from that, the grass is still getting a little sunlight and it can grow. That's what creates the grass edges. So in a grass lake and a non-grass lake, we're actually fishing the exact same spot. The difference is that in your grass lake, there's something tangible there. In your lake where we're fishing a color line, a reservoir situation, a clear water situation, there's nothing there at all. It's no different than the rest of the shore, except there's this magical line out there. But what is the deal with that line? Why does it matter? Bass want to be in the shade. We just talked about this, how to catch bass when it's hot. In fact, I'm going to link that video in the video description if you missed it, because there's a lot of really good information in that. But talking specific to the color line, these bass will back out to this line because they can sit deep enough that they're in the shade. It doesn't look like shade to you and I, it looks like open water. We can't tell the difference. But when they get on that color line, they can drop down to right where the sunlight is no longer penetrating, and a bass can suspend out there. They can sit, depending on the clarity in the lake, 5, 10, 20, 40 feet underwater in the middle of the water column. They can just sit, and they are effectively sitting in shade, just like they were under a dock, just like they were up underneath a tree or up under a grass bed. They are in the shade in the wide open. And by sitting there, they are able to look up and out, and anything, any prey that might move above them is silhouetted. They can see it clear as a bell. So it is an incredible place for bass that have been pressured to pull to and set up to feed effectively and to be protected from the harsh summer heat. It's an amazing spot. And it is the most overlooked place in any lake. Now, fishing those fish, you can catch them a lot of different ways. I've got 3 or 4 quick ways for you here that are just really fun. They're major standouts. The first one is topwater. Those fish are suspended. And again, it depends how clear the water is. I have been in lakes where it's pretty murky and they're only sitting like 3 to 5 feet under the surface because that's all it takes to get out of the sun. I've been on lakes that are crystal and we're throwing a topwater and you're landing that topwater in 80 feet of water and a bass comes up from 50 all the way to the surface and smashes your topwater. It's incredible. It just depends on the water clarity. But catching those outside fish on a topwater is awesome. Almost no one does it. Where do you fish this edge? Where do you target fish on the color line? It's so simple because there's a color line around the rim of the whole lake, right? It's all the same places. It's the outside humps. It's the long tapering points. It's all the places you already know to go, but these are the fish that are up and out and suspended. That's all it is. So we're just a little farther off of all the same places. Again, modern electronics, a guy who's good on forward-facing sonar, you can target fish out there no problem. But even the guy who has none of that, you can visibly see the color line with your eyes in a clear reservoir. You just fish the color line. That's where the fish are. You don't need modern electronics to do it. We've caught double digits, quite a few of them, actual 10, 12, 13 pounders off of color lines in the summertime with no modern electronics. That's how Tim and I grew up. That's what we were doing. Now, you can do it faster and easier with electronics today, but that stuff is not a must-have. It is just a helper. It makes the task easier. It makes it faster. But we were catching these exact fish 20 years ago with none of it. just fishing suspended open water fish just on repeat until we ran into one of them. It worked then, it works now. So the top water is an awesome option. Now here's the thing about the top water. You've got to be able to pull them. Bigger is better, louder is better, obnoxious is better, especially if you've got to pull them long distances. This pattern, color line fishing, is where my love for wake bait fishing came from. This is where it started. It wasn't pitching it up on shallow cover. I was fishing reservoirs where I could call fish to the surface out in 150 feet of water. Of course, the fish were only 20 feet down, but the water was that deep. We're throwing wake baits out there on the color line, and out of nowhere, kaboom, they'd explode on that thing. You will never forget that. I can replay these clips in my mind over and over of all these different fish in the middle of summer that have just unloaded on wake baits in open water. The other way is going to be a big walking bait. That's a jowler. That's what that bait is right there. Throws a ton of water. It's got a great sound, a lot of commotion, but that face is spitting a lot of water as well. It's a lot of commotion. It's a lot of drawing power. It's a full-size topwater. Compare it to a Giant Dog X. See how much smaller this bait is? This bait is quieter. It's smaller. It's more subtle. This bait is bigger, louder, more obnoxious. Two very different situations. Here, I'm just trying to get them to bite. I know that they're in that grass. I just need to raise them up. Here, I've got to pull them a long ways to get them to take the shot in the first place. That's the concept with the topwaters. The second way is strolling. And this did not exist in my fishing 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's a newer technique to us. It is not newer to fishing, it is just newer to bass fishing. But strolling, take the jig and minnow, mid-strolling, bottom strolling, whatever you want to call it. Taking that jig head, putting that pintail plastic on there, putting a fork tail plastic on there, and shaking that thing through the water column. We've all seen how effective this is the last few years. It's incredible. What I want you to understand is that this is unbelievably effective whether or not you have electronics. Don't connect them in your head. This is not a forward-facing sonar bait. This is a bait that can also be fished forward-facing. It can also be fished completely blind. It can be fished from shore. It can be fished from a canoe and a kayak. It doesn't matter. It's very effective. What's the idea here? The idea, it's just like fishing a swim bait. You throw a swim bait out and you reel it, and that paddle tail's just back there kicking, coming through the water column. With this, we throw it out, and instead of steady reeling, we add a shake of the rod tip. So we're shaking while we reel, okay? That creates body roll, the shake. So instead of a tail kick, it's a body roll. The fish just haven't seen it. It's crazy how well it works. If you haven't tried it, you are 100% missing the boat. But especially on the color line with those suspended fish, throw it out, start immediately. If nothing happens, throw it out, count to 5, start again. Throw it out, count to 10, start again. Once you get bit a time or two, you can pay attention. If you have electronics, you're seeing what's happening. If you don't have electronics, count it off in your head. I got bit 8 counts, is not really seconds, right? Because we're not that accurate, but on an 8 count down, that's the cast I got bit on. Keep going. Get bit again on an 8 count. Now you know exactly where you're fishing. Don't throw out and fish the top. Don't throw out and fish the bottom. Every cast, 8 count. You'll run into more fish. But shaking those minnow style baits is incredible. That is the Crush City Freeloader. That is the Hog Farmer 5-inch Stroll Shad. Both of these are laying on the deck of my boat all day, every single time I do this technique. They're that effective. They have both got to be on deck at all times. And then last but not least is slowing down. These fish that sit on that color line, there's times when they're aggressive and there's times that they're just hanging out. When a fish is up against a piece of cover, you can tell when they're like moved up and looking to eat, and when they're sucked to the bottom up against the stump and they don't want to move, they're grumpy. Out on a color line, those fish go through the same mannerisms. Sometimes they're sitting out there looking up ready to eat. Other times they're just trying to sit in the shade. So it depends what their mood is, whether or not they're coming shooting up for a wake bait or just acting like they never saw it at all. If they're acting like that, if they're lethargic, suspended on a color line, those fish are harder to catch, but there's two baits that stand out to me to catch them. One is a 5-inch Senko, and I'm almost always going to wacky rig it. The wacky rig allows me to throw it on much lighter line, and I get more action out of the bait, because again, we're just falling in open water. A lot of times, I'll never even let it get to the bottom. I might only be fishing the top 15 feet of the water column in 50 feet of water. I don't need to let it go all the way to the bottom. I just let it go part way down, and they'll either swim over and get it or not, and then I reel up and cast again, cast again. The amount of fish I've caught in the middle of nowhere on a color line on a 5-inch Senko is crazy. And then the other one is so overlooked, and that is the tube. You can take a tube. The beauty of a tube is what we call the death spiral. So if you take a tube, like that tour tube right there, you put a 1/4 ounce head on that thing, okay? And you throw it out into open water and open your bail, it does not sink to bottom like this. It sinks to bottom like this. It does the death spiral. If those fish are really in a mood, some days the death spiral is the ticket. Sling a tube out there, free spool, and just wait for it to stop. It'll be coming down, and they'll just swim over and get it. But I found, unlike the Senko, a lot of times I'll free spool it and I let it go all the way to bottom. That death spiral calls fish, just like a wake or a big topwater will call them to the top. It has drawing power. And a fish that's suspended, now I won't do it out past about 50 foot. It's not like I'm gonna take a fish that's 30 feet down and try to get them to follow me to 110. I'm not gonna do that. But if those fish are in 10 to 30 over 50, throw that tube and just let it go. They might grab it on the way down. If my line stops, I'm gonna reel up and go. But if it doesn't stop, I let it go all the way to bottom, and then I let it sit for a second, then I give it one bump. Let it sit, then wind up and repeat. So often, a big lethargic one will just follow it down. They see it happening, and they just follow it down. As soon as it gets to bottom, they just pull up on it. That first little bump, they're on it. They smoke it. Or they don't. After that, it doesn't matter if I drag that tube for another 5 minutes. They're not going to eat it. That's why I do one hop, wait, and then wind up and go again. That's all there is to it. Guys, this is the most overlooked way to fish in the summer. Everyone makes the same mistake. Whether they're fishing the bank, they're up on visual cover fishing for fish that have been beat up, or you're ahead of the crowd and you are an offshore guy now, but you're still just fishing that same stuff like everybody else. Those fish are beat up too. Don't fish for the beat up fish this time of year. Depending on your fishery, get on the grass line or on the color line. The truth is it's the same place, and you will discover fish that no one else is beating on. These baits are exactly what Tim and I use to target these fish. It's what we use to call fish up or to go down and get fish out of that cover. These are what we rely on. If you're looking for a bait that you can fish with confidence, you know what we're using, but you can try all sorts of other things too. Guys, again, we'll link all of this in the video description for you. I'll give you the baits, our favorite colors, the details of exactly which head, how much it should weigh, all those things. It's all in the video description, along with some of the gear we use to fish them effectively. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.